Cheese County, how's everybody doing this morning? This is Michael Zehr coming to you live from the Warrior Healing Center in Sierra Vista. And joining me today is Jeff Andrews. And we're going to get to know Jeff a little bit today and find out some interesting things about him. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining today. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Is it Jeffrey or Jeff?
Jeff.
Because I know you by Jeff.
In the Marine Corps, everybody called me JJ.
JJ, okay. Well, again, thank you for joining me today. So let's get started here. The first thing I wanted to ask you about is where are you from? Where's home? Before you got here.
Well, I'm from a very big family, originally from Jacksonville, Florida. My father was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps for the pilots, for the officer candidates that were trying to get their pilot's license and all that stuff in Pensacola, and then in Jacksonville, in AS Jacksonville, and that's where I was born in AS Jacksonville Naval Hospital. Then we moved to California during the Vietnam, right before Vietnam. My dad was one of the first Marines that went over there as an advisor. By the time the Vietnam War started, he was already a master gunnery sergeant.
Okay.
So he went over like 1965, I believe, was his first tour. He was a World War II veteran, a Korean veteran, a Lebanon veteran, and Vietnam.
Wow, a lot of places.
Yeah, he was my hero. He was the reason why I probably became a Marine.
And as you shared with me off camera, you've got a lot of family members that are also military, have military connections, if you wanted to share that with us.
Right. I had a brother that was a Marine during Vietnam. I had a brother that was in the Army just at the end of the Vietnam War. He was stationed in Berlin at the Berlin Wall. He was in the United States Army. And then I had 4 of my sisters that were all married to veterans in various branches of the service. And my uncles were Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Merchant Marines. My grandfathers were in the military during World War I.
Wow, a lot of military history in your family, huh?
I've got a discharge paper of my great-grandfather who was a private in the Union Army out of Indiana and stationed in San Antonio, Texas during the Civil War.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
So, where were you living at when you decided that you wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps?
Oh, I was actually in Portland, Oregon. I was going to college to be a Bible major, of all things.
Okay.
I was studying to be a preacher, and that at that time, the Iranian government captured our hostages when the Ayatollah Khomeini came back to Iran. They captured the 49, I believe it was, American hostages.
Okay.
And I thought that I should do my duty and join the Marine Corps and help to, if we were going to go to Iran and get our people back, I wanted to be a part of that. Like I said, I came from a military family, so I just felt it was the right thing to do. And so I joined the Marine Corps in May of 1980. And I went into the reserves so that I could go back to college if there was nothing going to happen. And I got delayed to going to San Diego, to MCRD San Diego, due to Mount St. Helens exploding.
Wow.
It stopped all traffic, all flights out of Oregon. And because of the ash just falling all over the city, it was just like night. And finally, on June 13th, Friday the 13th, I reported to the Yellow Footsteps there in San Diego and started my career as a U.S. Marine.
Tell us a little bit about what it was like in your experience when you had to go in, because I was Army, so I don't know about the Marine Corps. Did you have like the MEP station, or you had to go in and do like the ASVAB testing and do your physicals and all that stuff, and then you would choose what MOS that you wanted to be?
I didn't get a choice on my MOS.
No?
Because in Oregon, the 2 closest cities were Portland, where I was going to college, And about an hour and a half or 2 hours south of me was Salem, the capital of Oregon. And in both of those places, the only Marines that were there were heavy equipment operator engineers
Okay.
in Oregon. So I asked to be stationed at Salem, where my brother lived, so that when I did my weekend warrior bit, I would be able to stay at my brother's house while I was doing my active duty time on once a month. And so I became a 1345, which is a heavy equipment operator. I operated the backhoe and the grader for, I guess it was from August of 1980 until May of 81 when I went on active duty.
Okay. Now, when you went active duty, because again, differences. So I'm learning myself. Did you get to pick like your first home permanent duty station,
No.
or any of that stuff? You didn't get to do that. Huh?
No, I asked to go in. I was interested in the O2 field, which is the prisoner interrogator intelligence field. But they said, well, you were heavy equipment, so we're going to put you in tanks in Camp Pendleton, which is heavy equipment.
Wow, that's heavy equipment, all right.
So I ended up in the 1st Tank Battalion Bravo Company, first tanks for my first tour of duty on active duty. I stayed there from 1981 until 1982.
Okay.
When they transferred me to the 1st Tank Platoon in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And I spent a year in Cuba with this tank platoon.
Oh, wow.
From there, I came back to 1st Tanks and Bravo Company in Camp Pendleton, California. And I said, I got to get out of this field. This isn't what I want to do. And I can't see getting out of the Marine Corps and driving a tank for anyone. So I applied for the intelligence field. I wanted to go into the O2 field. And so you have to go for intelligence. You have to fill out a background check. And the government goes all the way back to your kindergarten. Spends about $50,000, I think at the time, $50,000 on a background investigation of you.
Wow.
They came back and told me that my clearance was denied because in 1959 I gave birth to a son in Mississippi who I did not provide care for. I wasn't sending what do they call that?
Child support?
Alimony payments.
Yeah,
or
child
anything.
support. Uh-huh.
And I said, well, that's kind of funny because I was born in 1961.
I was wondering about that when you said 1959. I was like, are we even alive then?
I was not. And so when they finally figured that out, they said, well, you're going to be a 2651. And I said, what is that? And they said, we can't tell you, but you'll find out when you go to school in Pensacola. So I ended up in Pensacola, Florida, and went through my A school as a 2651, which is signals intelligence. And what I can basically tell you about my MOS was that we had top secret clearances with SCI access, and that's about all that we talk about.
Okay.
As far as what we did.
So then what happened after that?
Well,
where did you end up after
from
that?
Pensacola, I went to Misawa Air Force Base, Japan. It's up in the northern part of Japan, 176 inches of snow a year. There was a group called Company E, Marine Support Battalion. I belonged to them, but I actually worked for the Naval Security Group activity, Misawa, Japan. So during the day, I would be, or night, because we were shift workers, I would work with the Navy in the skiff, and I reported to a chief, petty officer, and then after I was done with my regular job during the day, then I would report to the Marine Corps office command, the Company E command, if they had anything they wanted to go over with me. So we worked a really rough schedule. We worked what was called a 2-2-2-80, where we worked 2 days, 2 mids, 2 eves, 3 days off. But during that 3 days off, then you went and did things with the Marine Corps that they had wanted you to do, such as marching drill, um, just different things like that, wall locker inspections, PFTs, PT. But during the job, actually, you were just wiped out because you worked from the 2 days were from 6 o'clock in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, and then you had the day off. Then you worked from 6 o'clock in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. You went home and went to bed and had to be back at work at 10 o'clock that night.
They allowed you to sleep?
A few hours, not very many, but a few. At that time, I was a young married Marine. I had a wife and my first son, who was 2 years old at the time that we moved to Japan in 1984.
Not the son that was born in 1959, right?
No, not that one. Don't know what happened to that guy.
Oh, my goodness.
Hopefully he got some money from someone. But yeah, I went to Misawa, Japan for 3 years. And then I was there exactly 3 years, from November of 84 to November of 87. Then I went to from Misawa, Japan. I was transferred to Marine Corps Air Station El Toro with the 3rd Marine Air Wing, and that's where I went to war in the Gulf War with that unit, with the 4th Special Security Communications Team, and we went to. We were one of the first people that immediately went to the Southwest Asia during the right after Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. We were the first guys out there in a country called Bahrain, a little island, 23-mile island out in the Persian Gulf, and we set up there, and we were there right next to the airport. So you learn to go to sleep in drastically hot conditions, 120-degree temperatures with jets taking off. And I don't know if it's still true today. Back during that time frame, jets were not allowed to use afterburners in the United States when they were taking off. But in the war, of course, then they always had to use their afterburners. They were fully combat-loaded jets, and it took the whole runway for these guys to take off. We had the 3rd Marine Air Wing there. The F-4 Wild Weasels from the Air Force were stationed with us, and a couple of aircraft carrier groups came and actually were assigned to that base. And it's pretty interesting. We were kind of out of the firing line, so to speak, for a while until CNN did what they shouldn't have done, and that's what during the early part of the time that we were there, they would always say from an air base somewhere in the Persian Gulf, this is CNN reporting. But one day they came along and said from Bahrain, this is CNN reporting, and that very night, from then on, we got hit with Scud missiles.
Oh, geez.
So thanks, CNN, for telling everybody where we lived.
Good job, Cartoon News Network. That's what I call them, Cartoon News Network. I know.
Then I
don't watch a lot of the news anymore. It's too depressing.
Yeah, I don't follow the news too much myself anymore. CNN so we had a group of Marines that transferred from Bahrain that were still a part of us. They transferred over to Saudi Arabia, where the helicopter unit from the 3rd Marine Air Wing was, where our helicopters were. And we all eventually moved from Bahrain to Saudi Arabia for that. And our next stop was Kuwait City, but they looked at our unit and they said, you guys have been here since the very beginning, go home. And so in, March of 91, after the war was already over, they said in March of 91, you guys get to go home. So we returned to El Toro from there.
It was so interesting because I remember watching the war, if that's what you want to call it, basically on news, and I was just flabbergasted. These Iraqi troops were going up and they were surrendering to news media people.
Oh yeah.
And they were just like, I don't know, it was just crazy. But
from what I understand about all that is that there were even Americans in the Iraqi army. What had happened was, like say, an American citizen, an Iranian was an American citizen, went back to Iraq to visit their relatives and to spend some time with their family. They would go to Iraq, and Saddam Hussein would conscript them and
really,
put them in the military. So those guys didn't want to fight America and the
heck
whole
no,
world.
yeah.
So I mean, we literally waited to have the war until there were over 500,000 troops there, and so you're talking about armies from Britain and America, Jordan. There a lot of these guys in the Middle East. They have people from other countries in the Middle East that volunteer to fight for a said country, like Saudi Arabia. They were like conscripted, but they were
like mercenaries, or
like kind of like a mercenary army, but they were volunteers. They volunteered to fight. In fact, I almost got in trouble while I was in Bahrain because I sat down and ate lunch with a Jordanian soldier, and being in intelligence, I had to be very careful of what I talked about and stuff like that.
And who you associated with.
Exactly. Yeah. So after I had lunch with him, the next thing I knew, I was getting called into the O2s, who wanted to know exactly what this guy had talked to me about and what we had discussed. And, I told him, we were just talking about the fact we were both married. We missed our kids.
Right.
And stuff like that. And
you were being human to each other.
Yeah, we were just being human. We were just conversing about the war and how boring. We sat there from August of 1990 until February of 1991, not doing anything. The air war kicked off in January of 91, and then in February, the ground troops actually made their move. And so we were there for almost a year, just sitting there prepping for what was to come. And it was, we heard on the news all the time about the morale problem. There was a big morale problem. There was no morale problem. We were just bored and wanted it to get going. We wanted to do what we were there to do. But we had good morale. We were excited. In fact, when they told our unit that we were being sent to the war, I was 30 years old by that time. I had already spent, half of my youth in the Marine Corps, and I went up to my staff sergeant. At the time, I was a sergeant. And I went to my staff sergeant, Larry Stevens, who joined the group. He's a good friend of mine. And I said, Larry, this is what I joined the Marine Corps for. Please don't leave me behind. And he said, don't worry, you're not. You get to go. And that was what I had spent 13 years in the Marine Corps to do, was to serve my country in a foreign land.
I really like the story that you told me, too, about the nickname that you had. Pops.
Oh yeah, because of the fact that most of the guys were younger men. We had some older guys that were older than me. My warrant officers, Larry Stevens, Staff Sergeant Stevens, at the time, I believe he retired just recently as a Master Gunnery Sergeant. But there was a few of them. JP, which was Staff Sergeant Parsons. Those guys were older than me, but most of the guys were younger. And so some of the guys called me Pops because I was a 30-year-old Marine,
Right.
And they're 17, 18, 19 years old. And it was funny.
See, Jeff is one of the volunteers here at the Warrior Healing Center, and that's how I actually got to know him, coming in and sitting down and talking with him. So if you see me glancing off to the side here every now and then, it's because I can see any comments that come in. So if anybody does have any questions, please, any questions for Jeff or myself, just type them here in the comments section, and I can see them over here off to the side. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case anybody did have any other questions for you. So
Okay, I thought you wanted to talk to me probably about how I wound up here at the
well,
Warrior Healing
that's
Center.
the next question. Yes, sir.
Well,
Well, let's finish your military service. So what year did you get out?
I got out as soon as we got home. The Marine Corps decided in its infinite wisdom that I should go to the 3rd Marine Division in Okinawa and take over the comm center. I was newly promoted staff sergeant, and they needed a staff NCO to run the comm center. And I said, guys, I just got home from being gone for a year from my family, and I really would like to stay in the continental U.S. or go to a different duty station. Or if I'm going to have to go to Okinawa, can you make it a 4-year tour and let me bring my family? And my handler, I don't know his name, was unable to or not willing to work with me on that. He said, you have to go. And I said, no, I've never received a bonus or never received a choice duty station while I've been in for 13 years. And I'd really like to go somewhere where I can take my family. When I left for the war, I had my oldest son, who had been 2 while I was in Misawa. Then I had a middle son. And when I went to the war, my middle son stopped talking to me. He refused to, he thought I left the family, and he clammed up. So when I would get a phone call back to the States to talk to my family, my middle son wouldn't. My wife would put him on the phone, and he wouldn't say a word.
Oh,
He
that's sad.
just wouldn't talk to me. And then my youngest son, who was
How
brand
old was
new,
he?
my
the
middle
time?
son was probably 4 or 5 at the
So
time.
he's probably still a little bit too young to
Let's see,
understand.
he was
then.
born in 87, so we're talking 90, 91, so he was 3, 4 years old, somewhere in there.
Too young to understand why Dad was not home.
Too young to understand why I left him, yeah, and that I was going to come back and all that. My youngest son didn't even talk when I went to the war, and then I got a phone call home right before we came home, and the first words out of my youngest son's mouth were, "When you coming home, Daddy?" And so,
Oh wow, that's got to get you right
yeah,
there.
that's a hard tug there. So by the time I got home, and I couldn't work with my handler to stay close to my family or bring my family with me wherever I was going to go. It was 2 years unaccompanied in Okinawa, or nothing. Well, I had not been on leave in 3 years, so I took terminal leave right on. We got 45 days leave for returning from the war, and
Okay.
then I went on immediate terminal leave.
Is that in addition to the normal 30 days that you accrue?
Yes, the 45 was given to you because you were in a war. That didn't come out of your 30 days leave that you
Okay.
normally got. So we went on 45 days leave. I came back. I went through 2 weeks of separation, and then I went on terminal leave for 3 months. And that gave me the opportunity to be able to find a job.
Well, I was going to ask, when you got out for terminal leave, you weren't actually out yet, but when you got out on terminal leave, where did you end up coming or going, I should say?
Well, I was there I had always lived